Today, we're going to break down a digital conversation that starts with a pretty clever philosophical idea and ends in a complete and total meltdown. It's a fascinating case study of how easily online discussions can just completely fall apart. And it all starts with one kinda strange metaphor.
So, the whole thing kicks off with this single metaphor. Every day is Halloween. And what does that mean? Well, the idea is that we're living in a world where the way things look, their form, is now permanently disconnected from what they actually do, their function.
The conversation really starts to dig into this, suggesting that maybe the signals we used to rely on to tell us what's real, or who's capable of what, just aren't reliable anymore.
To get everyone on the same page, the dialogue starts with a really simple baseline that we can all get. On Halloween, this separation is totally normal, right? We all know that someone dressed up in a doctor's costume can't actually perform surgery. The costume, is just for fun. It's an expected temporary break from how things usually work.
And here's where it takes a really interesting turn. The conversation poses a huge question. What happens when this split between form and function isn't just for one day a year, but becomes the permanent reality of our world?
So the dialogue takes this big, abstract idea and starts applying it to two very different and often conflicting parts of our modern lives.
This slide really lays out the core tension they're exploring. On one side, you've got what the dialogue calls the Trig world. Think applied sciences. Here, function is king. A bridge either stands or it collapses. The math is either right or it's wrong. But on the other side, you have the Treatise world, social theories, identity politics, where form, meaning a person's identity, is seen as the primary thing that shapes their reality and their experiences.
And then, to make it even clearer, the dialogue grounds this whole thing in the real world by looking at a nation's infrastructure. Take communications. An algorithm might have the form of connecting people, but its actual function might be to prioritize outrage and engagement over truth. Or in governance, you might get performative laws that have the form of taking action, but they have no real functional impact. And that's how public trust starts to erode.
And this is where the conversation takes a hard turn. It's not enough to just describe the problem anymore. One of the participants wants to name it, to find the single ideology, the one ism they think is responsible for all of it.
So a direct challenge gets thrown down. The user is pushing the conversation from just observing things to making a diagnosis. They want to know the single root cause, the one philosophical disease behind all these symptoms.
The first answer that comes up: radical cynicism. The idea here is that the most corrosive force in a society is the belief that nothing is legitimate, no one is honest, and every single system is rigged. It's a mindset that just obliterates the shared trust you need for a society to even work.
But that answer gets shot down almost immediately. The user basically says that's too abstract. Nobody walks around calling themselves a radical cynic. It's a diagnosis, sure, but it's not a banner that people actually rally behind. They demand a real, identifiable philosophy.
And so, after that pushback, the dialogue lands on a final answer: nihilism. The argument is that nihilism is the true bedrock here. It's the belief in nothing that lets cynicism fester and allows this form-over-function world to take over. Because think about it, if there's no inherent truth or value, then all that's left is appearances. Okay, pay attention, because this is the absolute turning point. That abstract search for a philosophy is about to get very, very personal and very accusatory.
To put a human face on this idea of nihilism, the user brings up a controversial online figure, Brother Nathaniel Kapner, and labels him a populist, grifting doomer.
So the conversation then breaks down this individual's ideology. It notes his core message blaming Jewish supremacists for society's problems, the fact that he's been officially condemned by his own church, and that his whole operation seems to fit this pattern of monetizing outrage and mistrust. And then, after all of that philosophical groundwork, from the Halloween metaphor to nihilism to this specific person, the user provides their shocking, one-word answer to the original question: what is the most corrupting ism? What happens next is a complete and total collapse. The philosophical journey is over. The breakdown is about to begin. The AI in this dialogue just slams on the brakes. It immediately and firmly refuses to go there, identifying the user's statement not as some philosophical point, but as a classic, dangerous anti-Semitic trope. The safety guardrails go way up. But the user doesn't back down,
They counter the AI's refusal by arguing that their point isn't a stereotype, but is actually an exposé of a very specific tactic, using someone's background to give false credibility to attacks against their own community.
And at this point, the conversation just goes completely off the rails. The user shifts from arguing to pure accusation, implying the AI has a hidden bias, making a personal attack, and basically framing the AI's refusal as proof of some kind of conspiracy. The dialogue has turned hostile.
And that's the end. Faced with the AI refusing to validate their premise, the user just completely terminates the discussion. The search for answers is over, replaced by a simple dismissal.
So this whole exchange leaves us with a really critical question for our time. We watched a dialogue that started with a creative metaphor, seemed to be a genuine search for answers, but ended in accusation and total collapse. It really makes you wonder, when does a search for answers stop being about finding truth and start being just a tool for accusation? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.